Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot let Edwin Edwards go to Congress. Now, I want to get into some Texas races. I started the RedState gathering and will end it at the same place. That what happens in Texas will happen in the nation. So goes Texas, so goes the nation. We've got to help Texas stay on the right path. And so RedState has gotten involved in what would generally be considered non-federal races, non-gubernatorial races, and that includes the Attorney General's race, where we came out in the primary and we supported our next speaker, who is and was the conservative in the race, who is and will be the conservative Attorney General for Texas. Greg Abbott is the current Attorney General. He's running for governor. He'll be our last speaker today. He has led fight after fight after fight after fight among the states against Barack Obama on environmental regulations, on healthcare regulations, on overregulation, on the border, you name it. We've got to have someone strong to succeed Greg Abbott in the Attorney General's office, and there's only one person on the ballot who can do that. He is our next speaker. You will not have to doubt his integrity. You will not have to doubt his credentials. You will not have to doubt his conservatism. And I have to tell you, had I not supported him and endorsed him, my wife would have never let me live it down, because we have a bunch of friends in Texas and they all love the guy. I've gotten to know him. I know his record, and I can vouch for his record. Ken Paxton.
Thank you all. Hey, Maggie. Thank you. Well, Eric, I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the support, and RedState is certainly making a huge difference in the conservative cause and conservative movement. So I appreciate what you're doing and the people that you're helping across the entire country. So I just wanted to tell you a little story about me. I grew up all over the United States, moved to Texas when I was 18 to go to Baylor, met my wife, Angela. We've been married 27 years, and we have 4 children. I have a son who's 21, and then I have 3 teenage daughters. So those of you know what I'm talking about, please pray for me. And just to give you a flavor for the Paxton family and how it works, you know, since I don't know all of you, I know a lot of you, but I don't know everybody, but this is how my family works. My wife, Angela, is a math teacher, and it turned out that a few years ago my son Tucker was taking geometry, and it turned out that Angela was his teacher. So before school started, she sat down with Tucker. She said, "Tucker, you know, I just want you to know I'm going to be your teacher. I'm going to treat you fairly. We'll get through this. I just want to know what you've heard about my class." And Tucker said, "Well, Mom, I've heard you're a great teacher. Everybody loves you. That you're nice. Everybody wants to be in your class." Angela's kind of smiling, and she said, "Tucker, who told you that?" And Tucker said, "Well, Mom, you did." Now you get the flavor of the Paxton family. So I've been traveling the state for the last year and a half, and the question most recently that I hear most about is the border, which is not shocking to you all. And I was just down there 2 weekends ago, and it was amazing. I had a couple observations that were really interesting to me that say a lot about what's going on. And the first observation was that most of the Border Patrol, and Perry mentioned this, I think a lot of people don't realize, they're 40 to 50 miles inland. They're not on the border. I remember I got briefed by our DPS, Department of Public Safety, and I asked them, I said, what would help more than anything? What would you all do differently? And they said, we wish that Border Patrol was on the border. So that was the first observation. Second was shocking to me. We went up and down the Rio Grande in these gunboats that Texas has. And I don't know if you all have seen those, but they have like 4 different sets of machine guns on them, 2 drivers, and then I saw the little Border Patrol boat. It didn't look very intimidating. And I asked these guys, the Texas guys, I said, "Y'all have been down here for about 5 or 6 years. Have you ever been shot at?" And they said, "No." And there's a reason they haven't been shot at. But I guarantee you, Border Patrol has. And I also was up in one of the helicopters, and we were going along the Rio Grande, and we saw Border Patrol actually locate about 10 to 15 illegals who had just crossed over. And they were looking in the sugar cane. They couldn't find them all. And our helicopter had like infrared on it, and they were calling down, helping Border Patrol find these people. So our equipment, that was the second observation, is our equipment's better than the federal equipment. So there's clearly more that can be done. And we, in Texas, obviously, Governor Perry made a good move and is putting National Guard, Texas National Guard on the border. We're spending lots of money. We've spent almost $500 million, according to Perry, on reinforcing what's going on down there. We're also doing everything we can to enforce our laws as it relates to drug trafficking and cartels and human trafficking. But it's clear that the federal government needs to do more. And a couple of examples, just in the last few weeks, were that 9-year-old Maggie in Parker County, who was molested and sexually abused by somebody who had been deported several times. And then just this weekend, a Border Patrol agent shot while fishing with his family. And I think until the federal government gets serious about this issue, we're going to see more and more of these type cases. Well, I know that not everybody's from Texas, but I want to answer a question about why Texas is so critical, in my opinion, to what's going on, not just in Texas, but the nation. I'm going to take you back to when I was in law school at the University of Virginia, founded by Thomas Jefferson. And I remember sitting in my first constitutional class with a pretty liberal professor from Yale who was teaching us that the Constitution was a living and breathing document that should be interpreted in light of today's cultural norms and values, not as the founders meant. Well, that was bad enough. And then one of my very smart classmates, probably Laura Ingram, who was in my class, asked the professor, why don't we ever talk about the 10th Amendment? And his answer, much to my surprise, and the surprise of most everybody in the class, was, because it's irrelevant. Shocking, but at that time, almost true, because no states were asserting it in their defense of states' rights. And what's been amazing, I've been in the Texas legislature for 12 years, and when I first got there, we had our first Republican majority in Texas in the Texas House, and we focused on state issues and state law. And as soon as Obama came into office, that changed. And we started focusing on federal issues and dealing with the federal government at every turn. And what also changed was Republican attorneys general around the country, and particularly in Texas, recognized the threat and began fighting back with the 10th Amendment. So I want you to know, for all the time that Obama's been in office, I've been trying to find something that he's contributed good to our country, and now I've found it. He's at least forced us to assert the 10th Amendment. Texas has clearly been under assault, just as much of the rest of the nation. And particularly in Texas, there's two areas where we have been under assault. One is economic. And I think that part of that is because it's difficult to understand why the federal government has come in here and tried to impact our oil and gas industry while they've done it with our coal industry, our fishing, our farming. Almost, if I go around the state, as I have, there's almost not a day that goes by that I don't talk to business owners that are concerned about the federal government intruding upon their business and making it more difficult for them to be profitable. And the question is, why are they doing that? And I think the answer is simple. We've been successful. We've actually run our state with lower taxes and less regulation. And the Democratic states that have done the opposite are struggling and losing jobs to states that have not done that. As a result, we've been under assault. I'll give you an example. I have a constituent had paid almost $4 million in taxes over a 3-year period. The IRS came in and said he'd underpaid by $400,000. He wrote a check for $400,000. He paid restitution of $400,000, and he paid interest and penalties of about $400,000. And the IRS still prosecuted him and tried to put him in jail. And he actually pled guilty. And I asked him why, because I sat there when he was sentenced by the federal judge who went after the IRS and said, "What are you all doing? This guy's paid over $4 million in taxes, and you're trying to put him in prison. That doesn't make any sense." And the guy that I knew said, "I had to do it because this is a family business. I employ over 100 people. I would have bankrupted my company defending myself. And so I took the hit." And so he's a convicted felon. The judge gave him community service when the IRS asked for prison time. And that, according to the judge, I went back and talked to him. He said that was as little as he went outside of the guidelines, and he gave him as little as he could. But those are the types of things that are going on in our state and our country. And then, as you know, you're very familiar that we're under political assault. And we're under political assault because if they can turn Texas blue, they'll control all federal offices. And that's why issues like voter ID are so critical, and so critical that we win those fights. Several years ago in Texas, we passed a voter ID law, very simple. Show your photo ID, you get to vote. You can use your ID, driver's license, you can use a military ID, you can use a passport. We'll even issue you in Texas a free ID if you can't get those. And we were sued by Eric Holder, went all the way to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and we lost. And let me give you a little background. I'll tell you why we lost. We are subject in Texas, we're one of 9 states subject to the Voting Rights Act. We were put under in the 70s. The original 6 states were put under for discriminating. We were put under because we had a high percentage of non-English speaking people, along with Alaska and Arizona. And the burden of proof changes when you're under the Voting Rights Act. Instead of the Justice Department having to prove that you've discriminated, you now have to prove that you didn't discriminate. You have to prove the negative, which is nearly impossible. And so we lost. And the Court of Appeals said, you're discriminating, Texas, not because you didn't offer an ID, but because it costs money to drive to get your ID. And our voter ID was struck down. Now, fortunately, the Supreme Court, a few months later, heard the Shelby case, and they struck down part of the Voting Rights Act, which took us out. And we were able to implement voter ID last November for the constitutional amendments. We were able to implement it in the primary. And the arguments that the Democrats and the Obama administration made was that voter ID would cause all kinds of problems logistically, and it would suppress the vote. And guess what? 3 elections, turnout went up. But is that the end of the story? No. Texas is being sued again. We're being sued under a different section of the Voting Rights Act, with the Obama administration trying to put us back under that owner's burden where all of our election laws are controlled by the federal government. And if we lose that, they control all of our election law, which includes redistricting and how we draw our lines, which ultimately affects the makeup of the legislature and public policy in Texas, and how long we can remain Republican state. And so these are critical issues. So as I kind of conclude here, I want to talk a little bit about where we're at. I know there's a lot of tension, a lot of frustration with the Obama administration. But I also think people like us have an opportunity, a historic opportunity. If you look at our founders and what they were up against the British Empire, no one thought they could win. If you look at the Greatest Generation and what they did to win 2 huge wars in 2 different parts of the world when they were not prepared to do so, it was amazing. And I think we have that opportunity. When Obama ran for the first time in my district, I have about an 80% Republican district. And I remember telling people in my district 6 months before Obama was elected, I said, you know what, we ought to all quit our jobs and go off and make sure that we elect a Republican president. Because the 6 months of income that we lose is going to be less than what we're going to lose if Obama's elected. Now, I didn't quit. None of my friends quit, and look what happened. It's my fault. But I want you to know, for the last 1.5 years, I've been out campaigning around the state, and I've left my job, I've been away from my family, because I'm all in. And I'm asking you all to be all in, because we're at that point in our history where we have to be all in, or we're going to lose it all. That's right. So I got to close just with one story about my race. You're told by all the professionals, all the consultants, never to mention your opponent's name. But I feel pretty good about this crowd that you guys are going to vote Republican no matter whether you know his name or not. So for those of you who don't know, anybody know who I'm running against? Sam Houston. Now, for those of you who don't know who Sam Houston was a Tennessee governor, came to Texas to be the first president of the Republic of Texas, and then became one of the first Texas governors. And for those of you who are from out of state, a lot of the in-staters will know this, but we have a kind of a history in Texas of, frankly, dead Democrats voting. But this is the first time they've actually run one. So So I want to close by saying thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And let's all be all in. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And I'm happy to answer a few questions I don't know if there are any. Go ahead.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Welcome to Fort Worth.
Thank you. Good to be here. My wife's from here, so I'm happy to be back.
We just are tickled plumb to death that you're going to take our good friend's spot, because he's getting ready to move up, you know.
I'm very excited about that.
But you got big shoes to fill. One of the things that our current Attorney General has done is put up a good defense, but he's also put up a good offense. You planning on going after Obama?
Absolutely. Honestly, yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I was very happy being in this Texas State Senate. For those of you who don't know, we have 31 senators in Texas. We represent almost 1 million people, and we almost have a 2/3 majority. We're hopefully going to be one short after Connie Burton wins her election. That's right. But it takes 2/3 to pass anything. So with 10 other conservatives, I could block almost any legislation in the state. But when I looked at the landscape of Texas, every statewide office holder changing after over a decade of having fairly consistent leadership across the board, I didn't want to leave the Senate. I left because I knew that this was a critical time in our state and that we were facing issues that if we didn't have the right people in statewide office in Texas right now, that it was going to be devastating. And so I gave up a safe Senate seat that I just won because I cared about these issues. I feel like they are critical to the survival of our state and to our country. So thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Hey, Ken.
Yes, Ray?
That's me.
I can barely see you, but I was sure it was you.
Yeah, thank you. Ken, are you aware that we have a Marine that's being held in Mexico at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Let me give you a little report. This morning, one of our Tea Party leaders, and a lady that is known, her name is Maria Espinoza, drove to Brownville, Texas with her husband, turned onto the International Bridge and blocked the bridge. Got out with her sign. It says Free Tamarisi. So the police and the sheriff's office surrounded Maria and said, Miss Espinoza, we're going to put you in jail. And she said, fine, that's why I'm here. Arrest me, but let me get my cameras out first. And so they said, your cameras? Yes. Well, let's talk about this. So they backed off, and she was very nice, very polite. They backed off. They did their file footage. They got the pictures and so forth that Maria wanted with the Remembrance Project, and the sheriff's office backed off and let her go. She got the pictures. She blocked the bridge, and she says, "We're here to bring the message about the Marine, Mr. Tamarisi, or I guess it's Sergeant, and also for they wanted to draw attention to the Border Patrol Vega." So anyway, those are the type of leaders that we have in Texas, and we sure appreciate your support when you're Attorney General.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want you to know that I'm your constituent.
God bless you.
I am from McKinney, Texas.
Well, thank you.
Now, I mean, I was originally in New York, but I voted for you last time, and I'll vote for you this time.
Thank you. And you are the perfect kind of person that we want immigrating to Texas. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'll take one more question.
Michael Fox from here in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
I voted for you. This may get into a whole lot more than we need to, but I still have never heard a definitive answer on whether it is still legal for Texas to secede or not.
You know, I'm actually, truthfully, I think that whether it's legal or not, I'm not ready to go there. I feel like Texas is a key for the entire nation, and I think we can win this fight. We've been in worse fights, as I mentioned in my speech, and I think it's critical that we are in that fight. So I am not ready to give up on this nation. Despite Obama, I do not want him to win. And if we walk away from that fight, he wins. So I'm ready for the fight. That's why I'm going to do this. And I hope you all are too. Thank you all very much. Thanks.